What if I told you that most people aren't really living? They're just surviving. Every morning, millions wake up, check their phones before they even breathe deeply, scroll through noise, and call it life. They eat, work, scroll, sleep, repeat. They chase comfort, distraction, validation, and call that peace. But deep down, they know something's missing. The world looks alive, but inside, it is hollow. Quietly, most people have surrendered. Not because they were defeated by others, but because they stopped fighting themselves. They have learned to accept mediocrity as their fate. They have confused stillness with stagnation, peace with numbness, happiness with escape. They're not living, they're surviving in slow motion. But here is the hard truth nobody wants to face. Life will not reward survival. It rewards those who dominate their existence, who take command of mind, emotion, time, and focus. And the blueprint for that domination has existed for over 2,000 years, written not in self-help books, but in the ashes of fallen empires by men who faced storms greater than ours and still stood tall, the Stoics. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, men who lived in chaos, ruled nations, faced exile, loss, betrayal, and death, and yet wrote about serenity, strength, and mastery. They didn't live easy lives. They lived deliberate ones. They left us the map to stop merely surviving and start dominating. Because Stoicism isn't about smiling through pain. It is about mastering yourself so completely that no chaos can break you. It is about being untouchable, not because life gets easier, but because you become stronger. So today, we're not talking about how to cope with life. We're talking about how to conquer it. The Stoic way. First, however, before dominating life, you need to face a brutal truth. Most of your suffering doesn't come from life itself. It comes from your resistance to it, from expecting ease, from waiting for motivation, from craving validation. As the Stoics would call it, this is slavery, not of the body, but of the mind. You wake up tired, scroll for distraction, and call it rest. You are lost and blame the circumstances. You call that fate. You procrastinate. You fear failure, and you call it patience. All that is avoidance, fear masquerading in logic's costume. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And most people, even with freedom, comfort, and opportunity, are slaves. Slaves to impulse, emotion, opinion, and fear. They have built cages out of their comforts and locked themselves inside. The Stoic doesn't escape the cage. He burns it down. He doesn't pray for an easier world. He prepares for a harder one. He doesn't wait for peace. He builds it within himself. And he doesn't wish for motivation. He trains until motivation becomes irrelevant. Because domination begins in the mind. Music shifts, low drums building like a heartbeat. You want to dominate your life? Start where you have power, in your perception. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That line is the foundation of mental supremacy. Most people spend their whole lives trying to control what they cannot: people, outcomes, opinions, luck, and neglect what they can, their response, their attitude, their choices. The Stoic flips the script. He stops asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and starts asking, "How can I use this?" He doesn't pray for rescue. He trains for resilience. He doesn't fear discomfort. He befriends it. Because every hardship is an invitation, a test of who you are and what you stand for. When the average person breaks under pressure, the Stoic sharpens himself against it. When the world complains, he listens. When others react, he reflects. He turns chaos into fuel. And that is how domination starts. Not with noise, but with control. Control of the only thing that has ever been yours. Your inner state. You see, survival is instinct. Domination is discipline. Survival says, I'll make it through. Domination says, I'll make it mine. The Stoics didn't just survive life, they conquered it. And if you want to truly dominate yours, you need to start practicing what they called premeditatio malorum. The premeditation of adversity. It means to expect everything to go wrong, to envision the loss, the pain, the betrayal before it arrives. Not to suffer twice, but to build immunity. Not to invite darkness, but to train for it. For when life finally hits, and it will, you won't be shocked. You'll be ready. Your peace won't depend on the weather. It will depend on your preparation. Music deepens, steady rhythm, rising intensity. But let's get real. Domination doesn't look glamorous. It is not pretty. It is not poetic. It is getting up earlier than you want to. It is doing the thing you don't feel like doing. It is sitting with discomfort instead of escaping it. Being disciplined when no one's watching. Controlling the tongue when anger burns in your chest. Choosing silence when you could shout. Choosing patience when your ego screams for revenge. That is where real power is built. In the small, invisible decisions that nobody celebrates. Seneca slept on the floor, wore rags, and ate stale bread. But not because he was miserable, but as an exercise in mastery, to show himself that luxury wasn't his master, that he could lose it all and still be himself. Could you say the same? What would happen if your comfort disappeared, your routines, your distractions, your safety nets? Would you still stand tall? Or would you crumble, showing how much of your peace was fake, dependent upon things you couldn't control? That is what Stoicism trains you for. Not perfection, but preparedness. And when life throws its worst at you, you do not flinch. You do not beg. You do not collapse. You adapt. You move forward. You dominate. Because domination isn't about power over others. It is about mastery over yourself. The person who can't control his own impulses can't lead anyone, let alone himself. The Stoics ruled empires because they first ruled their minds. So ask yourself, are you ruling yours? Or are you letting every emotion, every distraction, every fleeting desire dictate your direction? The truth is harsh yet freeing. If you can't command yourself, you are not living. You are being lived by everything around you. Music softens. A single note of piano, slow and reflective. It is time to stop surviving. It is time to stop floating through life, hoping things will change. It is time to reclaim control, not of circumstances, but of you. The Stoic doesn't wait for confidence. He earns it through consistency. He doesn't wait for motivation. He builds it through momentum. He doesn't hope for peace. He trains for it every day. In his mind, in his actions, in his silence. And that is the difference between surviving and dominating. The survivor reacts to life. The Stoic designs it. Domination begins in the smallest moments. When you choose effort over excuse. When you sit with discomfort instead of fleeing from it. When you decide that life doesn't owe you ease and you don't owe it fear. Because here is the ultimate Stoic truth. You were not made to survive the world. You were made to master it. Music builds slow, triumphant rise. And from this moment on you will, not by running from pain, but by facing it, not by avoiding the storm, but by becoming its calm center, not by asking for less struggle, but by growing stronger than every struggle you meet. Because you don't just exist to survive, you exist to dominate. You have survived long enough. It is time to live your own life like a commander would lead an army. Survival is reactive. It is instinct. But domination, real domination, is intentional. It is when every step, every thought, every emotion bends to your purpose. The Stoics knew life would never grant you control. It is something that must be seized from within. The first rule of domination is awareness. You can't rule what you refuse to see. Most people drift through life half, asleep, slaves to emotion, routine, and habit. They think they're choosing, but their choices are made for them by fear, by comfort, by impulse. Stoicism demands that you wake up, that you become the watcher behind your own thoughts. Epictetus said, "When someone is properly grounded in life, they shouldn't have to look outside themselves for approval." That's the first test of inner dominance. Can you act without applause? Can you do what's right when nobody notices? When the crowd doesn't cheer, when the world is silent, will you still stand by your principles? That is where most people fail. They move only when the world watches. They act only when they get assurance of praise. That is not strength but dependency. The Stoic doesn't need witnesses. He doesn't need validation. He trains in the dark, far from noise and attention, for he knows the real battle is in silence. Music deepens slightly, a soft undercurrent of drums. Domination is not about controlling others. It is about mastering yourself so completely that the world cannot control you. When insulted, you stay calm. When ignored, you stay focused. When doubted, you stay steady. Because domination is not a reaction, it is a state of being. And that state is forged in difficulty. You can't dominate life while avoiding the discomfort that shapes you. The Stoic doesn't fear pain. He uses it. He treats it like a sculptor treats the hammer. Every blow refines the form. Every hardship reveals what is essential. As Seneca once said, fire tests gold, and adversity tests brave men. Think about that. You can't become gold without fire. You can't become strong without suffering. Pain is not an interruption of your path. It is your path. Every obstacle you face is raw material for your growth. You are not meant to escape it. You are meant to build through it. And yet, the average person spends their entire life running. From pain, from discomfort, from reality. They sedate themselves with pleasure and wonder why they still feel weak. They scroll through lives that aren't theirs, living vicariously through the illusions of others, and call that inspiration. But it is not inspiration. It is escapism. The Stoic doesn't escape. He endures, changes, and observes himself while struggling. When others break, he builds. When others numb, he notices. He learns to carry the weight that others drop. Not because it is easy, but because he refuses to remain fragile. You dominate life by embracing what it gives you, not just what you want from it. Marcus Aurelius ran one of the largest empires in history, yet he wrote daily about death, betrayal, failure, and loss. Because he knew mastery isn't attained through conquest, it is attained through perspective. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Music rises subtly, deep, and patient. Every problem in your life is secretly a lesson in control. That person who betrayed you, they taught you detachment. That failure, it taught you humility. That rejection, it taught you direction. Everything that once felt like destruction was actually instruction, but only if you were paying attention. You see, life doesn't punish you, it prepares you. Every setback, every heartbreak, every loss is life's way of testing whether you've built the strength you say you want. The Stoic doesn't ask, "Why me?" he asks, "What is this making me into?" That is the difference between surviving and dominating. The mindset of a student versus the mindset of a soldier. To dominate your life, you have to stop being shocked by difficulty. Expect it. Train for it. The Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, the visualization of hardship. They pictured loss before it happened, failure before it struck, and pain before it arrived, not to suffer in advance, but to disarm the future. When reality hit, they were already composed. Imagine if you lived that way. Unshaken by the unexpected, grounded when others panic. How powerful would you be if nothing could surprise your soul anymore? That is what Stoic preparation builds. Not a softer life, but a stronger person. Most people worship comfort, but comfort makes you weak. You can't grow in luxury. You can't find discipline in indulgence. You can't build focus when every impulse is gratified. Comfort seduces you into complacency. It teaches you to mistake pleasure for peace. The Stoic refuses that trap. He chooses voluntary hardship. He fasts when he could feast. He rises early when the bed calls him back. He sits in silence while others drown in noise. Why? Because those small acts of discipline build an unshakable mind. When real hardship comes, he is already trained for it. When chaos strikes, he is calm. That is not luck. That is design. Music swells, then steadies into a deep reflective tone. It is the paradox of Stoicism, involuntarily going towards discomfort. You get freedom, where you are not afraid of any pain. The world has no control over you. The man who can bear anything becomes unstoppable. That is the secret, not to escape the suffering but to transcend it. Epictetus was born a slave. He was beaten, insulted, owned. But he never broke. He said, "You may fetter my leg, but not even Zeus himself can control my will." That is what real dominance sounds like. Not arrogance, but inner command. He had nothing. Yet he owned himself completely. That is your challenge. Stop letting the world dictate your emotions. Stop handing your peace to people who didn't earn it, and stop reacting to every opinion, every inconvenience, and every insult. For when you lose control of yourself, you hand over your crown. When you reclaim it, life itself bends differently around you. You will still feel pain. Yes, you will still get angry, tired, and uncertain. But the Stoic doesn't deny emotion, he directs it. Anger becomes focus, fear becomes awareness, pain becomes fuel, and every feeling has a use if you refuse to let it use you. The path of domination is quiet, it is lonely, it is hard. You'll lose people who prefer the comfort of mediocrity. You'll confuse those who measure success by applause. But that is what comes with mastery, solitude, and self-respect. And once you accept that, nothing can touch you again. Sound of music softens, low hum, like distant thunder fading away into stillness. The Stoic life isn't about acting like you are. Okay, it is about being strong enough to stay steady when you are not. It is about turning every defeat into discipline, every pain into purpose, and every moment into a mirror. Life isn't going to spare you. But once you've trained the mind to meet it with stillness and strength, when your calm becomes your power, you don't just survive it. You command it, dominate it. There is a truth most people run from their whole lives, and that is why they never rise. The truth is this: the world owes you nothing, but it will test you in everything. You can't control what happens, but you can always control who you are through it. That is the line between those who survive and those who dominate. The Stoic doesn't wait for mercy, he prepares for reality. Look around. People spend years chasing fairness, begging for recognition, wishing life would finally make sense. But Stoicism says something brutal and liberating. Life does not care about your expectations. It does not automatically reward the righteous. It does not punish the wicked on the spot. The universe plays by its own rules, and the only real power you have is how you respond. Marcus Aurelius ruled the mightiest empire of his time, yet wrote to himself every morning, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Imagine that, the emperor of the world starting his day reminding himself that he could die before sunset. Not out of fear, but to sharpen focus, to remember that the only thing he ever truly owned was this moment, and his mind within it. That is the Stoic mindset. Total control over your inner world, even when the outer one collapses. Most people have it reversed. They let every little shift in their environment dictate how they feel. Traffic ruins their morning. One rude comment poisons their day. A setback destroys their momentum. They give everything outside of them permission to rule what is inside. But the Stoic builds the opposite system. His peace doesn't depend on weather, praise, or success. It is made from discipline, from the way he meets the day, from the choices no one sees, from the courage to remain unmoved when the world shakes around him. The music deepens, a faint, rhythmic pulse, like the sound of marching footsteps. Domination begins when you stop negotiating with excuses. When you realize your emotions aren't commands. They're information. You don't have to act on them, merely observe them, understand them, and choose how you act in response. You feel anger, but you don't lash out. You feel fear, but you still step forward. You feel doubt, yet you act anyway. That is what makes the Stoic warrior different from the ordinary survivor. Epictetus, a former slave, said, "Any person capable of angering you becomes your master." Now consider how much of your life you've given away that way. Every argument, every petty reaction, and each wasted hour in emotional chaos. Every time you handed someone else the keys to your peace. But when you learn restraint, when you master pause, you take those keys back. You become the ruler again. You will know you are growing when peace becomes your default response, when you no longer explain yourself to everyone, when you stop reacting to things beneath your energy. When silence becomes your strength, not your weakness. The Stoic doesn't suppress emotion. He transcends it. He feels everything and is owned by nothing. That is mental freedom. That is the type of strength that no external power can break. And this strength does not come from philosophy alone, but from practice, repetition in the small, unseen battles of daily life. While the world worships outcomes, the Stoic worships consistency. For he knows the man who wins once by chance can lose it all through chaos, while the man who masters his mind cannot be dethroned. Music transitions to a darker tone, heavy with reflection. Let's be real. Life will humble you. It'll strip you of comfort, confidence, and certainty. People will betray you. Plans will fail. Pain will come. The weak crumble. The reactive rage. But the Stoic, he breathes. He accepts what he cannot change and acts where he still can. That is the battlefield. Not out there, but inside. There is a story of Seneca when he lost his wealth overnight because of political corruption. Most men of his stature would spiral into despair. Seneca simply said, "Fortune has taken nothing from me. She has only taken her own," because he never confused ownership with attachment. He enjoyed everything deeply, but held nothing tightly. That is the Stoic paradox. To love fully, but not cling. To care deeply, but not depend. The Stoic prepares his soul for both abundance and loss. He trains his mind to stay steady, whether praised or blamed, rich or poor, known or forgotten. Because he knows dominance over life doesn't come from outcomes. It comes from identity. Who you are when everything falls apart determines who you truly are. Music grows, a low, triumphant pulse. Most people live as emotional puppets, their strings pulled by what they can't control. They want to dominate others before they've even mastered themselves. But Stoicism flips the order. Rule yourself first, and the rest follows. The Stoic doesn't seek domination through pride. He seeks it through presence, through the calm clarity that comes from knowing nothing outside himself can define him. That is the quiet power of someone truly in control. The person who doesn't need to prove it anymore. Ask yourself this. The Stoic doesn't rush transformation. He trusts the process. Every setback becomes a lesson. Every obstacle a teacher. Every struggle strength in disguise. Epictetus said, "Circumstances do not make the man. They reveal him to himself." When it all falls apart, when the mask falls off, when the world strips you bare, what is left? That is domination. To create a character so resilient that not even ruin can touch it. Music swells. Strings rise with a sense of quiet triumph. You are not supposed to drift through life waiting for luck. You are supposed to direct it, to take whatever chaos gives you and turn it into clarity. To look at pain and say, "You will teach me." To face fear and whisper, "You will not stop me." That is the Stoic spirit. That is what it means to dominate your life, not by overpowering it, but by outlasting everything that tries to break you. The Stoic doesn't fall apart when the world falls apart. He stands taller because he knows something most people forget. It isn't happening to you, it is happening for you. Every trial is a forge. Every loss is instruction. Every silence is an invitation to rise stronger. Music softens, a calm wind passing through. And through it all, the Stoic never loses his humanity. He loves deeply without attachment. He gives generously. But without expectation, he forgives. Not to forget, but to be free. His power doesn't come from dominance over others. It comes from mastery within himself. That is what separates the Stoic from the crowd. People chase status. He chases stillness. They seek comfort. He seeks growth. They want to be seen. He wants to see clearly. That is what makes him unstoppable. And when the day does arrive, the final day, the one the Stoics spent their whole life preparing for, he will meet it calmly, not with fear, but with peace, because he has already practiced dying every day, dying to ego, dying to impulse, dying to illusion. What is left is pure awareness, gratitude, presence. Music swells softly, light and hopeful now. This is what it means to dominate your life with Stoicism. Living awake in a world asleep, to be unruffled in a chaotic world, to become disciplined in a world full of distractions, to act with integrity in a world of masks. It is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole. It is not about avoiding the pain. It is about walking through it with dignity. It is not about control. It is about clarity. Because once you've mastered yourself, life no longer controls you. You stop begging it to be easy. You stop chasing validation. You stop running from pain. And instead, you move through the world like a force of nature, silent, steady, unstoppable. Music rises, triumphant, cinematic. So let this be a reminder that dominance is not about yelling louder or fighting harder. It is about standing still when the storm hits. Knowing you've faced worse inside your mind. It is about showing up again and again, without complaint, without fear, sans the need for applause. You live not to escape life, but to experience it fully. You breathe not to survive, but to lead yourself through every challenge with calm command. You love, you lose, you rebuild. And through it all, you remain grounded. That is the Stoic path. That is the warrior's peace. So henceforth, stop surviving, stop reacting, stop waiting. Begin to live with discipline, with purpose, with stillness. Build strength so unshakable that the chaos of life becomes your training ground, not your prison. And when they ask what your secret is, you'll simply smile. For it was never a secret. It was Stoicism. It was awareness. It was you, finally awake. Music fades into silence, leaving only the echo of calm breath. You weren't born to merely survive the world. You were born to master it. Dominate your life with Stoicism.